It started with a sound that cut through the air like a lightning strike, 4 deafening gunshots echoing in the quiet morning. A man staggered but did not fall. This wasn't just any man. It was Anthony Rivers, a brilliant black prosecutor known for dismantling corruption cases that others were too afraid to touch. But on this day, he wasn't in the courtroom. He was walking into the courthouse, briefcase in hand, when a police sergeant raised his weapon and fired. What happened in the next few minutes would not only shock the entire city, but leave the courtroom gasping for air in disbelief. And as you listen closely, you'll discover a powerful truth about justice, dignity, and how arrogance can crumble in the blink of an eye. Now, before I continue, if you're already hooked and want to hear how this incredible story unfolds, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss my latest uploads. Because what's coming next is a twist you will not see coming. Anthony had been on his way to argue one of the biggest cases of his career, a case involving a network of corrupt officers accused of intimidation, bribery, and brutality. The city was already tense. Many feared the case would expose powerful names, perhaps even some within the courtroom itself. But as Anthony crossed the marble steps of the courthouse, Sergeant Miller, one of the very men under investigation, stepped forward, his hand trembling over his weapon. "Stop right there!" Miller shouted, his voice cracked, raw with fury. "You're not walking in there today!" Passers-by froze, their gasps filling the air. Anthony slowly turned, confusion clouding his face. "Sergeant, what is this? You're making a mistake." But Miller didn't hesitate. The shots rang out. Bullets grazed Anthony's suit, one tearing through his sleeve, another striking the briefcase that now lay cracked open on the courthouse steps. Papers scattered like white doves in the wind, legal briefs, evidence, testimonies, fluttering across the ground. And here's where the irony began. The prosecutor they wanted to silence did not fall. By some twist of fate, or perhaps destiny, Anthony stood firm, shaken, but alive. The courtroom doors flung open, judges, lawyers, and jurors spilling out in horror. For a moment, the marble steps became a stage, and every eye was on Miller, his gun still smoking in his hand. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, a commanding voice boomed, "Arrest him!" It came from Judge Eleanor Graves, the presiding judge of the very case Miller had tried to stop. Officers hesitated at first. One of their own, a decorated sergeant, was standing before them. But the weight of her authority could not be ignored. Within seconds, Miller was wrestled to the ground, his protests echoing off the stone walls. "This isn't justice! He's the criminal here, don't you see?" Miller shouted, his words laced with desperation. But the world had already seen enough. Anthony stood, dusting off his coat, his face pale, but his resolve unshaken. He picked up his briefcase, dented from the bullet that could have taken his life, and held it high for everyone to see. The crowd gasped. It was almost symbolic. The law itself had shielded him. But the story didn't end there. Minutes later, the courthouse was packed. The trial Anthony had come to prosecute was suddenly overshadowed by what had just happened outside. News cameras swarmed the halls. Reporters whispered. Everyone knew this was no longer just a corruption case. It was about survival, truth, and whether justice could rise above fear. Anthony walked into the courtroom, his sleeve torn, his steps steady. The jurors, who had been unsure only moments before, now stared at him with wide eyes. They had seen what it meant to risk everything for justice. And then came the emotional peak. As the case began, Anthony presented evidence showing how Sergeant Miller and others had abused their positions for years. But when Miller was dragged into the courtroom, cuffed and furious, the irony was too rich to ignore. The man who had declared himself judge, jury, and executioner now stood powerless before the very system he tried to destroy. "You fired at me on the courthouse steps," Anthony said, his voice calm but cutting. "Not because I was guilty of anything, but because you feared the truth I carry. You thought you could silence me with violence. But the law does not bow to bullets. It bows to justice. The courtroom fell silent. Even Miller's defenders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The arrogance that once filled his chest seemed to collapse under the weight of Anthony's words. But just when it seemed like justice had triumphed, something else happened. The defense attorney, sweating and pale, leaned forward and whispered something into Miller's ear. Miller's face twisted into a smirk, as if remembering a secret he wasn't supposed to reveal. Then he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You think you've won? You don't even know who you're really up against." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Anthony froze. The judge raised an eyebrow. What did he mean? Who was pulling the strings behind Miller's attack? The trial was paused, chaos filling the room. Reporters scrambled out, phones buzzing, whispers bouncing off the walls. Anthony knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about Miller. It was bigger, much bigger. If you're really enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you never miss my latest uploads. Now let's dive back in, because what's about to happen next will leave you stunned. The courtroom still trembled from Sergeant Miller's chilling words. "You don't even know who you're really up against." The gallery buzzed with whispers, reporters scribbling notes, jurors exchanging uneasy glances. But amid the chaos, Anthony Rivers, the black prosecutor who had survived Miller's bullets, stood steady. He had faced threats before. He had faced intimidation before, but never had justice felt this fragile, balanced on the edge of fear and corruption. Still, Anthony knew, if he backed down now, then Miller's attack, and every crime tied to it, would go unpunished. Judge Eleanor Graves pounded her gavel. "Order in this court, we will proceed." Her voice was sharp, slicing through the noise. The room hushed, though tension still rattled the air like an approaching storm. Anthony rose, torn sleeves still visible, a quiet, powerful reminder of the attack outside. He began his argument. "Members of the jury," he said, voice calm but carrying strength. "You just saw with your own eyes what happens when power goes unchecked. This man, Sergeant Miller, tried to silence me with bullets. Ask yourselves, why? What truth was he so desperate to bury?" A ripple of unease spread across the jurors' faces. Miller's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. Piece by piece, Anthony laid out the evidence. Records of bribes hidden in fake accounts, testimonies from citizens too scared to speak before, photographs of bruises, hospital reports, and internal memos showing cover-ups. The corruption was deeper than anyone had dared to admit, and Miller wasn't acting alone. At that moment, the irony hung thick in the air. The man who tried to kill justice was now the very reason it would prevail. His violence had only spotlighted the truth he feared. Still, Miller sat there smirking as if he knew something no one else did. "You think this is the end of me?" he sneered. "There are others, bigger than me. You'll never win." Anthony paused, then stepped closer to the jury. His eyes burned with fire. "Maybe there are others. Maybe the fight doesn't end here. But today, justice has a chance to stand. And all of you," he gestured to the jurors, "hold the power to decide if the law bows to fear or if fear bows to the law." The room went silent. You could feel hearts pounding. Hours later, after tense deliberations, the jury returned. Everyone leaned forward as the foreman read the verdict. On the charges of assault, conspiracy, and abuse of power, we find the defendant, Sergeant Miller, guilty on all counts. Gasps filled the courtroom. Miller's smirk collapsed into disbelief. He rose, shouting, "This isn't over! You'll regret this!" Officers stepped forward, restraining him as he kicked and cursed. The once feared sergeant was dragged away in chains, powerless before the very system he thought he controlled. And the gallery erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. For the first time in years, the people saw justice strike back at corruption. Anthony didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply sat down, exhausted, his torn sleeve and battered briefcase still beside him. Justice had been served, but the weight of what it cost hung heavy in the air. Reporters rushed to the steps outside, shouting his name. Cameras flashed, but Anthony's words were simple. No one, no matter their badge or title, stands above the law, and no one should ever believe bullets can silence the truth. And with that, the story ended. Not with vengeance, not with despair, but with justice standing tall where fear once ruled. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't loud or triumphant. Sometimes they're the quiet proof that dignity and truth will always outlast corruption and hate. And here's the life lesson you should take from this story. Power means nothing without accountability. True strength isn't shown in fear or violence. It's shown when justice rises, even against impossible odds. Now let me ask you this. Do you believe justice will always win in the end, no matter how dark things get? Drop your answer in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.